right? Last Mishnah that we were looking at was Mishnah 7 in my numbering, my edition, where Hillel sees a skull floating on the water and says this kind of karmic philosophy, right? He says, because you drowned somebody drowned you, and believe me, the person that drowned you will get drowned themselves.
Wait, where are we again?
In Mishnah 7, chapter 2. He saw a skull floating, right? Some people have it as Mishnah 6.
Yeah. 7.
Right.
Okay.
And what you want to say something?
Rabbi, what are we looking at? What book are you? Are you looking at a book?
I'm looking at chapters, the fundamental teachings of the rabbis, Pirkei Avot. We talked last time about the fact that you have it in the Shabbat Sidur, remember? It's found in the Shabbat Sidur at Mincha for Shabbat.
All right, I'm looking.
Which one do you have? The big Sim Shalom?
I have the Sidur Sim Shalom. That's not it for Shabbat.
Yeah.
That's it.
Shabbat.
613 you want.
No, she wants for Shabbat. She wants it. It's a different.
Yeah, but she wants page 613 in the book that she has.
No, she wants
the one I have.
No, she wants page 200 and something.
I don't think so.
In the Shabbat Sim Shalom, it's page 261, page 261, Mishnah 7.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Got it. Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Anybody have anything else that they want to add? We talked a little bit about it a couple of weeks ago. Okay. So then that's it. Moving right along. We're now on Mishnah 8. Mishnah 8, the next Mishnah. Okay, who'd like to read that for us, please?
I'll read.
Thank you.
He used to say, the more flesh, the more worms. The more property, the more anxiety. The more wives, the more witchcraft. The more maidservants, the more lewdness. The more men servants, the more robbery. The more Torah, the more life. The more schooling, the more wisdom. The more counsel, the more understanding. The more charity, the more peace. He who has acquired a good name has acquired it for himself. He who has acquired for himself words of Torah has acquired for himself life in the world to come.
Okay, so we have a couple of, we talked about, we have a group of sayings that are put in contrast to another group of sayings, all of them with the word marbeh in Hebrew, right? One who increases so-and-so, then increases so-and-so, right? So that's, first he has these negative kinds of consequences for certain things that he doesn't think are good. And then he has positive things that have positive consequences for things that he thinks are good. And then he has one last teaching, which again is runs along and has one repeating word, the word kana, right? If he acquired, a person who has acquired. There again, we have something that's connected, but also something that's contrasted. So now let's go to the beginning. So the beginning is a bunch of critical remarks, and what's he upset about, or what is he trying to be warning people about?
Well, our note, we have a note in ours about the first one, the more flesh, the more worms, is about he said a denunciation of gluttony.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, it's since 1 week away from doing this, and I lost my whole rhythm here. Now we have to ask. Josie's not here. Oh, Josie is here, but Bill is here. You've got Rabbi Shapiro's version. Okay.
He has. Hillel used to say, "The more fat, the more disease. The more possessions, the more worry. The more wives, the more rivalry. The more maids, the more frivolity. The more butlers, the more theft. However, in parentheses, the more Torah, the more life, the more study, the more wisdom, the more guidance, the more understanding, the more generosity, the more peace. A good reputation will serve you in this world. Knowledge of Torah will serve you in the world to come."
Okay. So he takes away the word acquire, and he just puts in the
more.
The message.
The acquisition, he says, in my book.
Right. The word kana is to acquire. So, and
I
he's
missed
also
the witchcraft part. I mean, obviously, all of us women just practice witchcraft all the time. Why
So
would you take that out?
right. He softens some of the negative consequences. He says frivolity when instead of moral turpitude, which is more a more accurate possible translation here. So yeah.
Our book has a note about that also, about the wives and witchcraft.
Yeah.
It says that rival wives resorted to witchcraft in order to retain or regain their husband's affection. Hillel saying thus condemns polygamy.
Right. And what was Rabbi Shapiro's thing about if you have too many wives? And how much is too many?
The more maids, the more frivolity.
No, that's maids.
Oh,
What
the
about
wives. The more wives, the more rivalry.
right. So he's like cutting to the chase, right? That's the underlying explanation that Sarita's note is about. Why would women always be doing witchcraft? And the understanding, the explanation is because they're being put into a competitive position, right? That they are not going to be able to win with a level playing field, because the level playing field has been created. The playing field has been created by the man in control, and whenever he wants, he can just marry another woman and add another woman to his harem and another woman to his harem. So how do any of the women who are his wives, how do they get any kind of sense of standing, any kind of sense of attention? They, if they complain, then they put themselves in a bad light, right? Then they're trouble. So, the power asymmetry in this kind of patriarchal way of doing things is androcentric way of doing things, puts people into the position of doing witchcraft. That's the explanation that we have. A lot of the commentators say that. So it's not that, oh, women are inherently witches, women are inherently, not to be trusted, they're off into some other thing, although there's plenty of that kind of way of thinking as well. And in modern times, that's been embraced by the feminist movement, by certain people in the feminist movement, who say witchcraft is simply men's not liking our religiosity, right? When men use that label of witch and witchcraft, it just means we're very uncomfortable and we're afraid of that woman. And what she's doing or what she believes, we can't abide by. So we're going to label it badly. On the other hand, sometimes witches really are witches. And so, that there's the Torah is against witchcraft, right? The Torah says that witchcraft is a capital crime. So, and it's phrased in the feminine. It doesn't say mechashef o machashefa lo techayu. It says mechashefa lo techayeh. It's the shortest verse in the Torah. A witch you shall not allow to live. So, so there is a tendency to think of women as being connected more with witchcraft, but the explanation, like I said, that Sarita brought up, is actually a kind of a sympathetic critique of a marital system which is totally unequal and unfair. And then when somebody's in an unfair situation, what weapons do they have to try to remedy that?
That's right. What do?
They end up having to resort to stuff that maybe is not so great. Jen, you wanted to say something?
I just find it interesting that with that one verse, that when the one time we meet an actual witch, the witch of Endor, she's an extremely sympathetic and nice character. Like,
Well, I don't know if
give Saul a little tip before he goes off, like eat something.
I mean, nobody says that that witches don't know how to cook, but toil, boil, and whatever it is. How does it go in Macbeth? So
Bubble,
Double,
toil, and
double,
trouble.
toil and
toil and
trouble,
trouble.
fire burn and cauldron bubble.
there you go. So, cooking is part of witchcraft. So, from biblical times, as you point out.
And Hansel and Gretel. Hey,
What?
Hansel and Gretel. She must have had a good recipe there.
Right, Hansel and Gretel, even before the Bible. So, yeah, I mean, that the Witch of Endor is a heartbreaking story, and very much sensitive to this kind of like pathos of, on the one hand, this kind of like crusade, literally a crusade against people who are doing things that are not looked at well by the religious and political establishment. And then it turns out, they're also human beings. Guess what? And they're capable of generosity and of empathy and all of that. So
And they're not a witch anymore.
well, they are a witch. They the Witch of Endor is actually a pretty capable, competent witch. She does things. She gets results. Not the results that Saul wanted, but she brings up Samuel. She calls him up from the dead. She succeeds. So yeah, and we've mentioned these other times. In general, magic, superstitious stuff is prohibited by the Torah, and we have two lines of thought about why they're prohibited. Maimonides, the arch rationalist, says they're prohibited because they're nonsense and because they're false. And you're supposed to seek the truth, and you're supposed to live a truthful life. And selling yourself to superstition and to ways of trying to live that are based on falsehood is just plain wrong. That's Maimonides. Nachmanides and other people in the more mystical tradition say the reason that you're not supposed to engage in magic is because it's real. Precisely because it's real. Precisely because it actually is tapping into dark forces in the world, but they're dark. So it's not about truth or falsehood, it's about good and evil. And that the demonic world is the world of magic, and it's a real world, but it's a bad world. So one group of, thinks about it in terms of, like I said, ontology, what's real and what's not, and the other thinks about it in terms of morality. So, okay, well, let's go back to the beginning. So the first part is it's against gluttony, right? And Hillel says, the person who increases their flesh is just increasing their rima. So rima, we have the translation, the general translation is worms or maggots. And again, Rabbi Shapiro sort of softens it up a little bit. What's his first translation?
Yeah, I just lost it. Sorry. The more fat, the more disease.
Right, so he says disease.
Just disease in general.
And but the word rima has to do with, again, like I said, worms and maggots that have to do with after you die. So after you die, you can be as sick as you want. The medical profession doesn't care. Well, they care only if it's sickness that's going to then affect somebody that's alive. Right, Lou?
It depends if they have an outstanding balance.
Right. And if they have a healthy bank account to pay it. Right. But just to touch on this issue in terms of contemporary realities, this is an issue of concern, and it's also a contentious issue. How much do we want to make fatness a concern of anybody? Is it something that's just nobody's business? Whatever it is, it is. We have people talking about, the crisis of obesity in American society, and it's linked to health issues. It's linked to the fact that there statistically, as far as I understand, there is a statistical tendency for more physical problems to arise when a person is significantly overweight. Craig is nodding his head. Yes? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
more chance of diabetes, more chance of heart disease, lung disease, a lot of
Right.
things. It's all
So this is, of course, a personal suffering issue, a personal health issue, but in our very corporatized society, meaning not just corporations, but also the fact that we are one corporate entity, everybody's health is everybody's problem. The pandemic has told us that also. We can spend a lot of money isolating ourselves and insulating ourselves from everybody else's health problems, but in the end, that's spending a lot of money too. So it costs, right? How and whether we take care of people who are sick is a gigantic social issue. So the way that Hillel attacks it is very, he's creating a kind of a contemptuous, disgusting image, and he's saying, look, if you want to, get yourself, bigger and bigger and bigger, it's temporary, right? All you're doing is feeding the worms eventually. You're not accomplishing anything. But there are certain places and certain societies and certain cultural situations that really value substantiality. A person is considered successful, person is considered strong, person is considered healthy if they're really robustly, in terms of their body, looking nice and round. So these are problems. These are problems. If a person is too thin, then they look very sickly, right? You never say about a person who's 100 pounds overweight, they look sickly. Well, not a lot of times. That doesn't. But a person who's 50 pounds underweight looks sickly, right? That's we just associate it that way. Yeah, Jen, you wanted to say something.
I think when Hillel is speaking, he's speaking in a different time, and where if you had the money you had to have a certain amount of money and privilege to be that overweight, which we're actually almost in the opposite now, where the more privileged you are, the less likely you are, the better food you can afford, the better, healthcare, the better
personal
program,
trainer, the trainer you have.
Exactly.
Right.
So Hillel is dealing with the opposite. He's dealing with gluttony as one symptom of the privileged, who are also the people who are going to have extra wives, who are also the people who are going to have extra land, et cetera, et cetera. So he's coming at it from a different place.
Right. So that's an important.
And I'm talking about that as somebody who struggles with weight issues. That's it's very different.
It's a very sensitive, tricky thing, but this is like an important point. What you're saying, this is about showing off. This is about actually making a point socially in your community and so on, by showing, look at how much I have accomplished, look at how much I have acquired, look at how much I've consumed. So yes, it's a different time, but consumption, being a consumer, is a very contemporary issue. So to a certain extent, we can see Hillel in his time saying words that are anti-consumerist that we would maybe want to try to translate into our time. Yeah, Sarita.
So I wanted to point that out as well, that all of these first, 4 or 5 things are all about acquiring tangible stuff. Whereas the ones that follow are not about tangible stuff, right? They're about mental and spiritual stuff.
And they use the word acquire, but they use the word acquire.
Yeah, and so more, in terms of the tangible stuff, more isn't better. In terms of the non-tangible, mental, spiritual, such, more is better.
Well, what I want that, so I just want to riff on that and say that he doesn't say more in the spiritual stuff. Maybe more is better, but he's saying get whatever you can, acquire whatever it is that you can. Every
My
little
book.
every little bit that you acquire is good. Every little bit of Torah is good. Every little bit of counseling and thinking about things and getting advice, that's good. So he's not saying try to show everybody how much more you can have than anybody else. He's just saying get it. Right? We had this before. Where did we have another knei? Right? The word kana is the word to acquire. Does anybody remember where we had another place that we had that verb of acquiring? Look at chapter 1, Mishnah 6 in my book. But this is Yehoshua ben Prachia and Nitai Ha'arbeli. Nitai the Arbalite received the tradition from the previous generation. Yehoshua ben Prachia said, everybody, you have that? Sarita, you got
Do
it?
you have a page, Rabbi?
No.
So it says,
Hold on a second. Wait, I just want to get in the not Eitz Chaim, in the what do you call it? In the Sim Shalom 258, number 6. Go ahead.
so it was provide thyself a teacher, get thee a companion,
Right. So
and
get,
judge all men charitably.
right. So the word get is also acquire. It's the same word, knei. Right. So that's the idea of making an acquisition. Buy it is in colloquial terms in Hebrew today, it's to buy something. But it means acquire, right? To make it your own. I talked a little bit about making things your own in the Torah Sparks this week. So get some of it, get some of this stuff. And there, of course, it's not the Torah or the rabbi, the teacher, it's a friend. Get a friend. Yeah.
Yeah,
Jen.
that's very good.
Jen.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea that it's going to take as much energy to get to get wisdom from the Torah and to study and to get holiness as it does to take energy to get all this stuff to make it to get wealthy and to get these wives and the land and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So question of where you want to put your efforts and where the greater reward will be. But in both cases, it sounds like it takes a lot of effort.
Yep.
I like that last line. When you assess people, tip the balance in their favor.
Okay, but we did that years ago when we were in chapter 1. We're past that already. We've made that our own. We've internalized that piece of wisdom, and we're on to the next step here. So we're back to chapter 2. As far as the other examples, the negative examples that he gives, we talked a little bit about having too many wives. So there's a kind of again, this ostentation, showing off, and in cultures where men can have many wives, that is a major way of showing how successful you are. And he's warning that this is, if we read it the way the traditional reading is, it has these 2 pieces to it. First of all, you're introducing witchcraft into your home, which is verboten, right? Prohibited. And second of all, you're actually mistreating people. Having too many wives is mistreating people. This is also, up for consideration by some people. Monogamy is not the only way that humanity has organized itself. And today there's a lot of questioning about that kind of issue. And obviously the Quakers, right? Not the Quakers, the Mormons. I always mix up Quakers and I don't know why. They all look the same. They all look the same to me, but I know they're very different. I know, and this is being recorded yet. So mea culpa. I apologize to the world. But the Mormons are the ones in Utah, right? So they were famous for this, right? And then they ended up getting sort of like embarrassed because there was such a pressure by the rest of the United States, and they sort of retracted that permission. 1 second, Josie. And we should, again, and we've mentioned it other times, the idea that you could only have one wife in Judaism was adopted about 1,000 years ago in Europe, but it was not adopted by the Jewish communities in the Islamic world, because in the Islamic world, actually having more than one wife is possible. So this is a case of, very much being influenced by our outside, culture and context. Christianity clamped down on polygamy and didn't allow it, and Islam didn't. So Jews in Christian lands adopted the negative attitude and made it into a law. And in the Islamic countries, the Jewish communities did not do it until we got to Israel. When we got to Israel and we had kibbutz galuyot, we had the ingathering of the exiles, and we had the Ashkenazi and the Mizrahi communities coming into close contact with each other in a way that they had not for centuries and centuries, then it became an urgent question within Israeli society. Is Israel as a state going to allow polygamy or not? And in 1950, the Sephardi, the chief rabbinate and the other rabbis got together and they adopted a prohibition against polygamy. So until 1950, polygamy was alive and well in the land of Israel.
Wasn't it grandfathered?
I mean, and it was grandfathered for those people who had. So, but legally speaking, it was no longer possible from 1950 to get married to more than one person. And the arguments are very much, as I said, that this is not an ethical system, that it's too many controls being exerted by one person, a male, but one person over other people. But there's been pushback, and there's been even feminist pushback, or quasi-feminist pushback in certain communities that where women that have been in these kinds of polygamous situations says, you don't know, this is so great. We have this sisterhood. We all watch over each other's children. We take turns doing the wash. It's actually a machaya. Yeah, Jen. Oh no, Josie wanted to say something, and then Jen.
Yeah, well, Josie's comment's a little frivolous. I had a devastatingly handsome grandfather, my mother's father. And in his 80s, he sent me a picture of himself standing at a fountain with 2 or 3 black ladies. And he said, he was by then a widower. He said, these ladies told me in South Africa, a man can have as many wives as he wants, and they want me to come back with them to South Africa. So even at 80, he was still a lady's choice.
Look at that. Right, and like I say, it brings up the question of how much choice is being exercised by the women in this situation, and every story is a little bit different. Okay, we're out of time. Jen, last comment.
It can wait. No worries.
All right, so we'll be waiting on bated breath till next week. Okay?
Ashikoah.
Ashikoah.
Stay well, everybody.